Good morning, TMS Logic students. This is a first for me, having to learn how to record over PowerPoint. I only just learned how to use PowerPoint a few days, I guess actually a few weeks ago. Well, this is only a 15-minute recording, so let's get started reviewing Chapter 1 in Book 2 Logic. And as we know, this concerns figure in syllogisms. It should be pretty simple review, and this is a pretty simple chapter. After doing all the exercises, I would imagine you feel pretty comfortable with it. But let's start with the definition of figure. That will be important to know for the quiz. The definition of figure is the disposition or location of the terms in the premises. Remember, we talked about the real estate saying location, location, location. Well, that is very important in what figure is all about. And notice it says the terms in the premises, not just the middle term. Figure is concerning the major, minor, and middle term, but the middle term is key. In fact, that is how we determine the figure. So here's some important things I want you to remember before you take the quiz. There are 4 figures. Excuse me. The figure is determined by the location of the middle term. So while the figure concerns all of the terms, we locate or determine the figure by where the middle term is. And where the middle term is located in the major premise and the minor premise, as you recall. So those are the 2 places we have to look. We have to look at the major premise and we have to look at the minor premise. And each figure has a Latin phrase identifying it. And you'll want to have those phrases memorized for the quiz. So first figure, the Latin phrase is sub pre. And I realize I may be saying that a little differently. But what it's identifying is that the major premise, the middle term will be the subject, and in the minor premise, the middle term will be the predicate. The subject and predicate of those propositions. I know we've talked subject predicate a lot concerning the conclusion so that we can identify the major and minor terms. But now we're really just looking at the individual propositions, the major premise and the minor premise, to determine where the middle term lies. The second figure is pre, meaning the middle term is the predicate of the major premise and the predicate of the minor premise. The third figure is sub pre. Again, the middle term is the subject of the major premise and the subject of the minor premise. And the fourth figure is pre sub. The middle term is the predicate of the major premise and the subject of the minor premise. And here's something else to keep in mind. The fourth figure is called the Galenic. I may not be saying that correct at all. Galenic figure. Just recognize it from the spelling because it was first introduced by Claudius Galenic. He considered it a separate figure. But it really is just the converse of the first, or an indirect figure. Here's what I prepared for myself when I put it on my note card. I know you should have it on your note card, and here's just another way visually to present it. In the very top, dark blue, we had the figure going across, first, second, and third, and the Latin phrase, and then identifying the premises and conclusion. I think that's just a helpful visual representation of these figures. Again, sub pre is first, then we pre, sub sub, and pre sub. So you can come back to this and copy it if you want. And but we're going to go ahead and move on here and review something else. So how do we identify the figure in a syllogism? Well, I don't have it here on my PowerPoint, but obviously, and as we practiced before, We first need to identify all of the terms. We need to identify the major term, the minor term, and the middle term. That would be probably the most thorough way of going about it. But another maybe shortcut is to look at the two premises and notice which term is repeated. That will tell us the middle term. And in this syllogism, felines is the term that is in both premises, so it is the middle term. We next need to look at each individual proposition and determine, is it the subject or predicate of that proposition? In the first one, cats is the subject, felines is the predicate. In the second, the minor premise, dogs is the subject and feline is the predicate. So therefore we see that the middle term is in the prey position. So which figure is that? Second figure, prey. So here's another syllogism. All bananas are yellow. This fruit is a banana, therefore this fruit is yellow. We see that bananas is the subject of the major premise, the predicate of the minor premise, therefore this is the sub-prey figure. Sub-prey. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. And therefore that would be which figure? Correct. First figure. Let's do two more. All U.S. presidents are men. All U.S. presidents are elected officials. Therefore, some elected officials are men. If you remember, the reason that I'm using some here is because the predicate in an A statement, this predicate is undistributed. That means it has the silent quantifier is some. So I must use that because it is the subject of, it's going to be the minor term in my conclusion. Some elected officials are men. We see that U.S. presidents is the middle term because it's in both premises. It's the subject of the major premise, the subject of the minor premise. So it's in the sub position, and that would be third figure. And lastly, no real rose is made of plastic. All things made of plastic are artificial. Therefore, some artificial things are not real roses. Again, I use some because this is undistributed since it's an A statement. This is my minor term, so it becomes the subject of the conclusion. Some artificial things are not real roses. We can now look at the where the middle term is, made of plastic, things made of plastic. I could have put things here too, and probably should have, to make it match up exactly. But this is made of plastic is the predicate of the major premise. It is the subject of the minor premise. Therefore, the figure is prey sub, fourth figure. All right, if you can recognize all the figures, and I would suggest underlining the middle term in your premises on your quiz so that that will help you to recognize them. You need to have the figures memorized. You need to know that first figure is sub-prey, second figure is prey-prey, third figure is sub-sub, fourth figure is prey-sub. And again, like I said in class, I remember after I have sub-prey, which seems pretty natural because we usually have the subject in our sentences in English first and then the predicate. Right after that, I pray. It's always good to pray, isn't it? All right, and finally, before you take your quiz, you will be asked again to list the 7 rules of validity. So be sure you go back over that. We've memorized it. You've been tested on it. I know we had a long break, but these should come back pretty quickly into your mind. Just go back over those, and you're going to need to list those out on the quiz. I guess I'm giving you a very big hint telling you that. All right, I hope that I can upload this to YouTube. That's probably my biggest concern here, and I've enjoyed trying to do this. It's going to be strange hearing my own voice as I listen to this. Glad we are home and safe and still able to learn from a distance. The great advances in our civilization put to use. Good luck on your quiz. Email or post any questions and I'll respond to them. Good job.